everyone, welcome back to another video. So today I have yet again another interview experience video. So today it is with the company Rio Tinto, which is basically a mining minerals kind of company. So I applied for their New Zealand graduate program on the 3rd of June. So this was just done online, obviously submitted a CV, transcripts, etc, etc, and I applied for the data science stream. And then the following day they sent me an email asking me to do an online assessment. So I did that, and then 10 days later, a recruiter from Australia called me, and unfortunately I didn't answer the call at the time, and then I couldn't call them back because it was an Australian number. So the next day I emailed them, and then eventually a couple days later they called me back and we scheduled an interview for the following week. So my interview was on the 20th of June, and only the day before did they actually email me. So I was like, it was kind of late notice and I wasn't even sure if like this interview was going ahead or not. But yeah, so they emailed me the night before, like literally 8 p.m, and emailed me the link and like the time of the interview and everything. And it was with a manager, like a recent graduate, and then the HR recruiter person as well. The interview was just done on Microsoft Teams. I was told it was going to be an hour long. It ended up only being like 40 minutes, which was nice. I feel like I've mentioned this a lot, but Microsoft Teams is like just not it. I'm sorry, but it's just not an ideal platform. Like it always is laggy, and then it like cuts off people's faces, so I only see half of them. But yeah, anyways, you know what, we powered through. So the interview started pretty, normally. I just got an introduction on them, on what Rio Tinto does briefly, and then they basically asked me to introduce myself and why I was interested in Rio Tinto. Talked a bit about my studies. I didn't really say much, to be honest, and then I just talked about how like they really value safety and like diversity and all that, so I was like really into that. They also kind of asked me like if I knew much about the company, and I said that they like deal with minerals and mining, and like the Invercargill plant was to do with smelting, so they seemed to be quite impressed with that. I had to use my RuneScape knowledge from back in the day. I think I forgot to mention, but when the recruiter called me to schedule the interview, they mentioned that the role was based in Invercargill, which, if you guys didn't know, is a very small town at the bottom of New Zealand. And they also asked me if I had asthma, which honestly was a bit of a red flag. Because I feel like if they're going to ask that, then clearly you're probably going to be exposed to some gases that may not be the best for you. At that point, it was still a bit of a red flag, and I kind of knew, well, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to go there, but I thought, let me just do this interview, like maybe, I don't know, I thought I might as well just do the interview. So yeah, and then basically the interview just started with some typical questions, as you would expect. Obviously safety is huge for them, so they asked a question about like, when did you utilize safety in the workplace, whether it was something that you thought was unsafe or a new process that you could see improvement. And essentially I just talked about working in a restaurant and having people use like safety gloves when they're cutting, so just super basic stuff. I don't think they're expecting too much. As long as you can just say something, then it's fine. Another one was how you dealt with feedback. So I talked about when I did my internship at the end, how I asked my team for feedback, and even though most of it was positive, like I pushed back and then I wanted some constructive feedback because I thought that was more useful in the long term. And then they kind of wanted to follow up, and they were like, okay, so do you think it's are you the type of person that tends to work more on your weaknesses, or do you try and work on your strengths and see if you could even improve on those as well? And I said that I wanted to work on my weaknesses because I felt like there was more scope for improvement, because when you're already good at something, there's only so much improvement that you can make, whereas on a weakness, you can turn that around a lot more. So yeah, I don't know if that made sense. I guess so. They also talked about setbacks and something about when you've had to improve from a setback. So I talked about my programming paper and how I failed the first assignments, but I didn't give up and I keep on pushing through, and yeah, eventually managed to pass the paper and do quite well overall. So yeah, I think honestly, having done a lot of these interviews, I kind of have these stories in my head already, so I don't need to do a lot of preparation for these interviews, which I think is good. And I think that's also a benefit of doing lots of interviews. I think you definitely get better with time, and after a certain point, these stories are just ingrained in your brain, and like most of the time they're going to ask similar questions, so you can just kind of like refer back to those. So that has like definitely helped me a lot. There was also just some like brief talk about what exactly I studied in my degree and my minor, which was data analytics, and they just kind of wanted to know like what specific technologies and systems that I had worked with. But yeah, it was really basic, and I didn't really need to go in depth. Like there wasn't any really technical questions. It was more just like, what do you know? So after about 30 minutes of questions, they asked me if I had any questions for them. So I basically just asked the typical, you know, what do you enjoy about like your role? And then also another one about safety. And I wanted to them to kind of elaborate, you know, how they really like embody that in their day to day. Yeah, and then after that, I was kind of done, like they were kind of done, but then the recruiter wanted to kind of talk a bit more, so they kind of got the people working in Invercargill to talk a bit more about like what life is like there. So they were like, everybody interviewed me was really lovely, and the team was really lovely. So honestly, a part of me feels bad because they were talking about how like Invercargill was such a great place, and like, you know, how there's gonna be a new shopping mall and like there's stuff to do. But I think at that point I was already kind of like, okay, like cool, but I knew that I wasn't gonna go there, so I did feel a little bit bad at that point. After that interview ended, honestly, I thought it went okay. Like I didn't really have any knowledge or inclination into whether I made it or not. I was just like, okay, that's okay. I didn't think too much of it. And then a few days later, I get a call from Rio Tinto, and I didn't answer the call at the time, but I knew that like, given the short time frame, I probably had been successful, because most of the time if you're unsuccessful, like they won't get back to you, or they'll get back to you very late. Whereas if they're getting in contact with you like a few days after an interview, chances are you've made it through to the next round. So I think that was actually the final stage. So a few days later, after that missed call, somebody emailed me and basically invited me to go for a site visit and a medical test, which I believe was the last stage of the process. So I think I actually got the job offer. But I decided to decline. The main reason was just like a safety concern, and I didn't want to be working at a site, you know, where I potentially could be like ingesting harmful fumes. And also like, realistically, I've lived in a small town and I don't really see myself thriving in Invercargill. And again, like, it may sound arrogant, but I do feel like since I already have this opportunity, like it almost boosted my ego in a way. Like, since I have one job offer, surely I can get another one. So I'm not really too worried about that. But yeah, overall, the interview process was very smooth, very easy. I would say if you have an interview with Rio Tinto coming up, you've really got nothing to worry about. Just make sure that you have one example of when you demonstrated like, you know, how you were safe in the workplace. And yeah, that's about it really. Not much advice, but hopefully you guys found this video interesting and informative, and I'll see you in my next one. Ciao.